The fluorescent lights of courtroom 4B hummed softly overhead as 3-year-old Emma Rodriguez sat perfectly still on the wooden bench. Her small hands gripped a worn stuffed rabbit so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. The toy's left ear was nearly torn off, its button eyes faded from countless nights of desperate hugging. Emma's own eyes, dark brown and far too old for her age, stared blankly at the polished floor beneath her dangling feet. She hadn't spoken a single word in 3 weeks, not since the last visit to her father's apartment. The Portland family courtroom buzzed with tension that Tuesday morning in March 2023. Emma's parents, Miguel and Sofia Rodriguez, sat on opposite sides of the aisle like warring generals, their lawyers positioned between them like shields. What had started as a simple divorce had descended into a vicious custody battle, each parent accusing the other of being unfit, each desperate to prove they deserved their daughter. The air felt thick with anger, resentment, and words that could never be taken back. Judge Margaret Rivera presided from her bench with the weary expression of someone who had seen too many families destroy themselves in her courtroom. At 58 years old, with silver streaks running through her black hair, she had spent nearly 3 decades on the family court bench. She had witnessed every form of parental conflict imaginable, but something about the Rodriguez case troubled her deeply. It wasn't just the usual custody drama, there was something darker lurking beneath the surface. Between the 2 warring parents sat Emma, flanked by 2 court-appointed social workers who had been assigned to monitor her well-being. The little girl wore a yellow dress with white flowers that her mother had carefully picked out that morning, hoping it would make her daughter look happy and cared for. But no amount of pretty clothing could hide the haunted look in Emma's eyes or the way she flinched whenever someone moved too quickly near her. Sarah Bennett, the lead social worker, had been working with Emma for 6 weeks. She had tried everything: play therapy, art activities, gentle conversation, but the child remained locked in silence. Emma would eat when prompted, sleep when told, and follow basic instructions, but she had retreated somewhere deep inside herself. Sarah had seen traumatized children before, but Emma's complete withdrawal was alarming. The child psychiatrist's report noted selective mutism likely stemming from acute psychological trauma, but nobody could determine what had caused it. Near the back wall of the courtroom, Officer Jake Morrison stood at his post with his canine partner. Rex, the 5-year-old German shepherd, sat alertly beside his handler. His professional demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos of human emotions filling the room. Morrison, a 12-year veteran of the Portland Police Department, had been partnered with Rex for the past 5 years. Together, they had worked everything from drug detection to crowd control, building a reputation as one of the most reliable K-9 teams in the city. But Rex was special in ways that most people in the courtroom didn't know. 2 years ago, Morrison and Rex had been selected for an experimental program developed jointly by the Portland Police Department and the Oregon Child Welfare Division. The program trained select K-9 units to detect physiological markers of trauma in children: elevated cortisol levels, stress hormones, and other chemical signatures that appeared when a child had experienced recent fear or harm. The science was cutting edge. The success rate was remarkable, but the program remained classified. Only a handful of people in the courthouse knew that Rex was more than just a security dog. This morning, Rex was acting strangely. Morrison noticed it the moment Emma entered the courtroom. The dog's ears had perked forward, his body tensing with an alertness that Morrison recognized. Rex's nostrils flared, taking in scents that humans couldn't detect. His dark eyes fixed on the small girl in the yellow dress, and a soft whine escaped his throat, barely audible, but concerning to Morrison. In their 5 years together, Rex had never reacted this way in a courtroom setting. Morrison placed a calming hand on Rex's head, whispering, "Easy, boy." "What is it?" But Rex remained focused on Emma, his tail low, his body language screaming that something was wrong. The dog shifted his weight, pawing once at Morrison's boot, a signal they had practiced hundreds of times during training. It meant Rex had detected something. Something bad. Judge Rivera's voice cut through Morrison's thoughts. "Mr. Chun, please call your first witness." Emma's father's attorney stood, adjusting his tie. "Your Honor, we call Sofia Rodriguez to the stand." As Emma's mother walked toward the witness box, her heels clicking sharply against the tile floor, Emma's small body went rigid. The stuffed rabbit fell from her hands, hitting the floor with a soft thud that somehow seemed loud in that moment. Sarah Bennett reached down to retrieve the toy, but Emma didn't seem to notice. The little girl's eyes were no longer staring at the floor. Instead, they had lifted, focusing on something across the courtroom. Her breathing quickened. Her small chest began to rise and fall rapidly. The second social worker, an older woman named Dorothy Mills, leaned closer with concern. "Emma, sweetheart, are you okay?" But Emma wasn't okay. For 3 weeks, she had been silent, trapped in whatever nightmare had stolen her voice. Now, sitting in that courtroom surrounded by arguing adults, with a specially trained dog detecting the chemical evidence of her trauma, Emma Rodriguez was about to break her silence in the most dramatic and terrifying way possible. And when she did, everything in that courtroom, and in dozens of lives beyond those walls, would change forever. Rex's whining grew louder. Morrison's hand instinctively moved to his radio. Judge Rivera paused, sensing a shift in the room's energy. And Emma, clutching the arms of the bench, began to tremble as her eyes fixed on something or someone near the back exit door. Her lips parted. After weeks of silence, words were finally coming. And those words would unleash absolute chaos. Sofia Rodriguez settled into the witness chair, smoothing her navy blue skirt with trembling hands. Her lawyer, Thomas Chun, approached with a reassuring smile, ready to begin his questioning about her parenting capabilities and why Emma should live primarily with her. But before he could speak his first word, something happened that would be replayed on news stations across the country for weeks to come. Emma stood up. It wasn't a gradual movement. The 3-year-old launched herself upward so suddenly that both social workers jumped in surprise. Sarah Bennett reached out instinctively to steady the child, but Emma pulled away with surprising strength. The little girl's face had transformed from blank emptiness to pure primal terror. Her eyes were wide, pupils dilated, and her small body shook like a leaf in a storm. "Emma, honey, sit down," Dorothy Mills said gently, trying to guide the child back to her seat. But Emma wasn't listening. She was staring at something across the courtroom with an intensity that made the social worker's blood run cold. Whatever the child was seeing, it had pierced through weeks of protective silence and dragged her back into a nightmare she'd been trying to escape. Judge Rivera set down her pen, leaning forward with concern. "Is the child all right? Do we need to take a recess?" The lawyers turned in their seats. Miguel Rodriguez half rose from his chair, confused by his daughter's sudden movement. Sofia's hand went to her mouth, tears already forming. Everyone in the courtroom watched as Emma raised her right arm, her tiny finger pointing toward the back of the room with absolute certainty. Time seemed to slow down. The pointing finger trembled, but remained steady, aimed like an arrow toward the back exit, where Officer Morrison stood with Rex. The German shepherd was already on his feet, every muscle in his body tense, his training taking over. Morrison's hand tightened on the leash, his eyes following Emma's pointing finger, trying to understand what had triggered both the child and his dog. Then Emma spoke. After 3 weeks of suffocating silence, after countless hours of therapy and gentle coaxing from professionals, after her parents had begged and pleaded for just one word, Emma's voice rang out crystal clear across the hushed courtroom. 2 words. Just 2 simple words that would shatter everything. Bad man? The words echoed off the walls like a gunshot. Emma screamed them again, louder this time, her voice breaking with terror. Bad man? Bad man? Her small body convulsed with sobs as weeks of suppressed horror came flooding out. Sarah Bennett wrapped her arms around the child, but Emma fought against her, still pointing, still screaming those 2 words over and over. And then all hell broke loose. Rex exploded into action with a ferocity that stunned everyone in the courtroom. The German shepherd lunged forward with such force that Morrison stumbled, the leash burning through his hand as 80 pounds of trained police dog pulled him off balance. Rex's bark was deafening, not the controlled warning bark of a security dog, but the aggressive, protective bark of an animal that had detected imminent danger. Rex, heel! Morrison shouted, but his partner ignored the command for the first time in their 5 years together. The dog was laser-focused on something, someone, pulling toward the back exit with desperate urgency. Morrison's training kicked in. If Rex was reacting this way, there was a serious threat. The dog had detected something on Emma trauma markers, stress hormones, fear chemicals, and now he was trying to neutralize whatever had caused it. Judge Rivera's gavel came down like thunder. Order! Everyone remain in your seats. But her voice was drowned out by the chaos. Lawyers were standing. Parents were shouting. The court reporter had stopped typing to stare in shock. Rex's barking continued, echoing through the high-ceilinged room, and Emma's screams of "bad man" provided a horrifying counterpoint. Morrison finally regained control of the leash, but his eyes were scanning the courtroom, following Rex's line of sight. The dog wasn't looking at Emma anymore. He was staring at the back exit door, his body angled toward it, every instinct telling him to pursue whatever threat he'd identified. Morrison's hand went to his radio, his training as a police officer overriding his role as courthouse security. "We have a situation in courtroom 4B, he spoke into the radio, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Need immediate backup. Possible threat to a minor." Judge Rivera was on her feet now, her face pale, but her voice commanding. "Bailiff Webb, secure that exit. Nobody leaves this courtroom." She pointed toward the back door, where Marcus Webb had been standing. "Lock it down now." But when everyone turned to look at the exit, Marcus Webb was gone. The door was slowly swinging shut, as if someone had just passed through it. The bailiff, who had been stationed there for the entire hearing, the man who had been part of the courthouse security team for 15 years, had vanished the moment Emma screamed. Morrison's eyes met Judge Rivera's across the courtroom. The same terrible realization hit them both simultaneously. Emma hadn't been pointing at Rex. She had been pointing past the dog, at the man standing behind him. At Marcus Webb, and Webb had run. "Lockdown protocol." Judge Rivera's voice boomed through the courtroom. "Security, seal all exits. Nobody leaves this building." She turned to her clerk. "Get me courthouse security and child protective services, now." Sarah Bennett was still holding Emma, who had collapsed into racking sobs against the social worker's shoulder. The little girl's screams had dissolved into heartbroken crying, the kind of crying that came from a soul that had been shattered and was only now finding the pieces. Dorothy Mills had her phone out, already dialing emergency numbers, her hands shaking. Miguel Rodriguez was trying to push past the bailiff to reach his daughter, his face a mask of confusion and rising panic. "Emma, what's happening? What's wrong with my baby?" Sophia was frozen in the witness chair, her testimony forgotten, tears streaming down her face as she watched her daughter fall apart. Rex finally stopped barking, but he remained alert, his body quivering with unused energy. Morrison was already moving toward the exit, his police training taking full control. He spoke rapidly into his radio. Suspect is Marcus Webb, courthouse bailiff, approximately 6'2", 200 pounds, last seen wearing standard bailiff uniform. Consider him a potential flight risk and possible threat to a minor. I'm in pursuit. As Morrison burst through the exit door with Rex at his side, the courtroom erupted into controlled chaos. Guards rushed in from all directions. The hallway beyond the exit door stretched empty and silent, but somewhere in that building, a man was running. A man who had stood in that courtroom for months, watching families tear themselves apart, appearing trustworthy and professional. A man who Emma Rodriguez had just identified with two simple words. Judge Rivera stood at her bench, her heart pounding, as she realized that what had started as a routine custody hearing had just become something far more sinister. Emma's silence hadn't been about her parents' divorce. The child had been hiding something much darker, something that had traumatized her so deeply that she'd stopped speaking altogether. And now, with those two words, bad man, Emma had finally told her terrible secret. The question that hung in the air as alarms began blaring throughout the courthouse was simple but horrifying. What had Marcus Webb done to that little girl? And who else might he have hurt? Officer Jake Morrison's boots pounded against the polished courthouse floor as he raced down the corridor with Rex straining at the leash. Beside him, the German Shepherd's nose was down, tracking a scent trail that only he could detect. Behind them, Morrison could hear the thunder of additional officers responding to his call, but he couldn't wait. Every second that passed gave Marcus Webb more distance, more opportunity to escape. The hallway stretched ahead like a tunnel, lined with courtroom doors and offices. Morrison's mind raced as fast as his feet. Marcus Webb, 15 years on the courthouse security team. Trusted, respected, the guy who brought donuts on Fridays and remembered everyone's birthdays. And he had run. Innocent men didn't run, especially not veteran bailiffs, who knew that fleeing made them look guilty of something terrible. Rex suddenly veered left, pulling Morrison toward the stairwell. The door was still swinging slightly. Someone had just gone through. Morrison grabbed his radio as he yanked open the door. Suspect heading down the east stairwell. Repeat, east stairwell. All units converge. The stairwell echoed with the sound of footsteps below, fast, desperate footsteps. Morrison caught a glimpse of movement 2 flights down, a flash of the distinctive bailiff uniform. Marcus, stop. There's nowhere to go. His voice bounced off the concrete walls, but the footsteps only got faster. Rex barked once, sharp and commanding, then launched himself down the stairs with Morrison barely holding on. The dog's training was extraordinary. He navigated the turns without slowing, his powerful legs propelling them downward at a pace that left Morrison's knees screaming. They were gaining. Morrison could hear Webb's labored breathing now, the panic in each gasping inhale. 3 floors down. 2 floors. Then the ground level. Webb burst through the stairwell door into the main courthouse lobby, and Morrison was right behind him. The lobby erupted in chaos. Civilians scattered. Lawyers grabbed their briefcases and dove behind the security checkpoint, and the guards at the metal detectors sprang into action. Stop him, Morrison shouted, but Webb was already running toward the main entrance. 2 security guards moved to intercept, but Webb had the advantage of surprise and 15 years of knowing every security protocol in the building. He feinted left, then dodged right, slipping past one guard and shoving the other hard enough to send him stumbling into a marble pillar. But Marcus Webb had forgotten about Rex. The German Shepherd didn't hesitate. Morrison released the leash, giving the command Rex had been trained for. Apprehend. Rex surged forward with the speed of a missile, crossing the lobby in seconds. Webb was 5 feet from the door, from freedom, from escape, when 80 pounds of highly trained police dog hit him from behind. The impact sent Webb crashing to the floor face first. His chin hit the marble with a sickening crack, and blood immediately began pooling beneath his face. Rex stood over him, teeth bared, a low growl rumbling from his chest. Morrison was there in seconds, his knee pressing into Webb's back as he yanked the man's arms behind him. "Marcus Webb, you're under arrest for obstruction of justice and fleeing an officer. You have the right to remain silent." Morrison's voice was steady and professional, but his hands shook slightly as he secured the handcuffs. Whatever this man had done to that little girl, it was bad enough to make him throw away 15 years of service and run like a cornered animal. "I didn't do anything," Webb screamed, his voice muffled by the marble and his own blood. "You can't arrest me. I have rights. This is insane." But his protest sounded hollow, desperate, the words of a man who knew his world was crashing down. Within seconds, the lobby was swarming with officers. Detective Lisa Morales arrived, her badge swinging from her neck, her sharp eyes taking in the scene with practiced efficiency. She was the department's lay investigator for crimes against children, and Morrison had requested her specifically. If his suspicions were correct, if Rex's training had identified what Morrison feared, then they needed the best. "Morrison, fill me in." Morales knelt beside the handcuffed bailiff, her face inches from his. "Mr. Webb, I'm Detective Morales. We're going to have a conversation, you and I." Morrison quickly explained what had happened in the courtroom. Emma's silence, her sudden identification, Rex's reaction, Webb's flight. As he spoke, Morales's expression grew darker. She'd seen too many cases like this, knew the pattern too well. A child who stopped speaking. A trusted authority figure. A dog trained to detect trauma. It all added up to something horrific. "Get him to interrogation room 3, Morales ordered. "And I want a full background check, personal and professional. Everything." She turned to Morrison. "We need to talk about your dog." They moved to a quiet corner of the lobby, while other officers hauled Webb to his feet and dragged him toward the basement. Interrogation rooms. His protests echoed through the lobby until the elevator doors cut them off. Morales crossed her arms, her expression serious. "Morrison, I've heard rumors about a special K-9 program. Off the books. Experimental. I need to know if Rex is part of it, and I need to know right now, because if he is, that dog just became a key witness in what might be a major case." Morrison hesitated. The program was classified. He'd signed non-disclosure agreements, gone through months of specialized training, been sworn to secrecy. But a 3-year-old girl had just broken weeks of traumatized silence to identify a threat, and Rex had confirmed something terrible had happened to her. Protocol didn't matter anymore. The truth did. "Yes," Morrison said quietly. "Rex is part of a classified program. We call it the Trauma Detection Initiative. For the past 2 years, Rex and 5 other dogs have been trained to identify physiological markers of trauma in children specifically. The chemical signatures of fear, abuse, and psychological harm." Morales's eyes widened. "You're telling me your dog can smell trauma?" "It's more complex than that, but essentially, yes. When a child experiences severe trauma, abuse, violence, chronic fear, their body produces specific stress hormones, elevated cortisol, adrenaline spikes, changes in pheromone production. These chemicals leave a scent signature that lingers for days or weeks. Rex and the other dogs were trained to detect these signatures and alert their handlers. And Rex alerted on Emma Rodriguez?" Morrison nodded grimly. The moment she entered that courtroom, "I've never seen him react that strongly. Whatever happened to that little girl, it was recent, severe, and it terrified her badly enough to leave chemical markers that Rex picked up immediately." Morales pulled out her phone, already dialing. "I'm calling Child Protective Services." We need a forensic interviewer and a medical examination. If Emma was abused, we need to document everything properly." She paused, looking at Morrison. "And we need to figure out Marcus Webb's connection to her. Because a courthouse bailiff doesn't run unless he's got something massive to hide." Morrison's radio crackled to life. "Morrison, this is Rivera. Bring Rex back to the courtroom immediately. The child is asking for the dog." Morales raised an eyebrow. "She's asking for Rex?" "Traumatized kids often form instant bonds with the animals that help them," Morrison explained. "Rex detected her pain and tried to protect her. She probably senses that. He keyed his radio. On my way, Your Honor." As Morrison and Rex headed back to the elevator, Morales called after him. "Morrison? That program of yours? It just proved its worth. Whatever happens next, you and Rex might have just saved that little girl's life." But as the elevator doors closed, Morrison couldn't shake a terrible feeling. Emma had identified Marcus Webb as the bad man, but Webb worked at the courthouse, not at her father's apartment building. So how did Webb know Emma? And more importantly, what had he done to her that was so terrible it had stolen her voice for 3 weeks? The elevator climbed upward, carrying Morrison and Rex back toward answers that would prove to be far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. Because Marcus Webb wasn't working alone, and the web of horror he'd helped create was about to be exposed in ways that would shock the entire city. Judge Rivera's chambers had been transformed into a safe haven. The harsh fluorescent lights had been dimmed, replaced by the warm glow of a desk lamp. Soft pillows were arranged on the leather couch, and a box of toys sat open on the coffee table dolls. Stuffed animals, coloring books. Dr. Sarah Chun, the pediatric trauma specialist who worked closely with the K-9 program, had arrived within 15 minutes of the courthouse lockdown. She sat cross-legged on the floor, at eye level with Emma Rodriguez, while Rex lay nearby, his calm presence a silent comfort. Emma hadn't let go of her stuffed rabbit since returning to the chambers. She sat curled into Sarah Bennett's side, the social worker's arm wrapped protectively around her small shoulders. The little girl's screaming had stopped, replaced by occasional hiccuping sobs and a hollow, distant stare. Her yellow dress was wrinkled and tear-stained. Her hair had come loose from its careful braids. She looked like exactly what she was, a broken child who had been carrying an unbearable secret. Dr. Chun had been doing this work for 12 years. She had interviewed hundreds of traumatized children, heard stories that haunted her dreams, and learned to maintain professional composure even when her heart was shattering. But something about Emma's silence, the weeks of voicelessness followed by those 2 explosive words, told her this case was going to be particularly difficult. "Emma," Dr. Chun said softly, her voice gentle as a lullaby. "My name is Dr. Sarah. I'm here to listen to you. Rex is here too. He's a very good dog, isn't he?" At the mention of Rex's name, Emma's eyes shifted toward the German Shepherd. The dog's tail wagged once, slowly, and he let out a soft whine of encouragement. Emma's grip on the rabbit loosened slightly. "Good boy," Emma whispered, her first calm words since the outburst. Her voice was small and fragile, like glass about to break. Dr. Chun smiled warmly. "He is a very good boy. Rex wanted to help you today. He could tell you were scared. Can you tell me what scared you, Emma?" The little girl's eyes filled with fresh tears. Her bottom lip trembled. Sarah Bennett squeezed her gently, whispering, "It's okay, sweetie. You're safe now. Nobody can hurt you here." "The bad man," Emma finally said, her voice barely audible. "I saw the bad man." Dr. Chun nodded, keeping her expression neutral, despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "The man in the courtroom? The one wearing the uniform?" Emma shook her head, and Dr. Chun's heart sank. It wasn't Marcus Webb that Emma had been identifying directly. It was more complicated than that. He looks like him, Emma said, struggling to find words for concepts too adult for her young mind. Same face, same voice, same scary. Dr. Chun exchanged a quick glance with Detective Morales, who stood quietly by the door, taking notes. If Marcus Webb looked like the actual abuser, they might be dealing with a family member. Brother? Cousin? The possibilities were chilling. Emma, can you tell me about the man who scared you? Not the one in the courtroom, but the other one. The one who looks like him? Emma's small body began to shake. Sarah Bennett held her tighter, making soothing sounds. Dr. Chun waited patiently. Rushing a traumatized child never worked. They had to move at Emma's pace, no matter how desperately the adults needed answers. He comes at night, Emma finally whispered. When Daddy is sleeping. He has keys. He opens the door really quiet. The room went absolutely silent. Miguel Rodriguez, who had been allowed to observe from a corner chair, with strict instructions not to speak, made a strangled sound of horror. His face drained of all color. His hands gripped the armrests so tightly, his knuckles went white. Dr. Chan's voice remained gentle, though her pulse was racing. This man comes into your daddy's apartment? Where you sleep? Emma nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. He says he's checking. He wears a uniform like police. He has a flashlight. He says good little girls don't tell secrets. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Someone with access to Miguel's apartment. Someone in a security uniform. Someone who looked enough like Marcus Webb to trigger Emma's terror response when she saw the bailiff in court. Emma, honey, what does this man do when he comes at night? Dr. Chun asked, though she already knew the answer would be devastating. Emma's voice became even smaller, a whisper that barely carried across the room. He touches me. He says it's checking to make sure I'm safe. But it hurts. And it's scary. And he says if I tell, something bad will happen to Daddy. Miguel Rodriguez broke. The sound that came from him was primal a father's anguish, guilt, and rage, all compressed into one terrible sob. He lurched from his chair, but a bailiff gently restrained him, understanding that Emma needed space, not more emotional chaos. I'm so sorry, baby, Miguel choked out. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I should have known. Dr. Chun raised a hand, signaling for quiet. She turned back to Emma with infinite patience. Emma, you are so brave for telling me this. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. Do you understand? You are a good girl, and you did the right thing by telling. Emma looked up at Dr. Chun with eyes that had seen too much. Is the bad man going to hurt Daddy now? Because I told? No, sweetheart. The bad man can't hurt anyone now. The police are going to make sure of that. You're safe. Your daddy is safe. And you never have to see that bad man again. Detective Morales stepped forward, her phone already in hand. She had heard enough to know exactly what they were dealing with. She stepped outside the chambers and immediately called her team. I need a full tenant list for Miguel Rodriguez's apartment building, she said rapidly. Focus on anyone in security, maintenance, or building management. Also run a background check on Marcus Webb's family members, brothers, cousins, anyone who looks similar. And get me a warrant for Miguel's apartment. We need security camera footage from the hallways, entry logs, everything. Back inside, Dr. Chun continued her gentle questioning. Emma, can you tell me what this man looks like? What color is his hair? Brown, like Daddy's. He's tall. He has a name tag, but I can't read yet. What about his uniform? What color is it? Blue, dark blue, with a patch. Emma touched her own shoulder, indicating where a security patch would be. Dr. Chun pulled out a tablet and opened a photo array application, specifically designed for child witnesses. Emma, I'm going to show you some pictures. If you see the man who scared you, just point to him. If you don't see him, that's okay too. Can you do that for me? Emma nodded hesitantly. Dr. Chun began scrolling through generic photos of men in security, uniforms, different faces, different ages, all in similar attire. Emma looked at each one carefully, shaking her head. Then she stopped. Him. Her finger touched the screen, and her whole body tensed. That's him. That's the bad man. But the photo wasn't in the security guard array. Dr. Chun had accidentally scrolled into a different folder, one containing photos of courthouse personnel that Detective Morales had pulled earlier. The face Emma identified with absolute certainty was Derek Webb, Marcus Webb's younger brother. A man who, according to the quick database search Morales ran immediately, worked as a security guard for Paramount Property Management, the company that managed Miguel Rodriguez's apartment complex. The connection was complete. Marcus Webb, courthouse bailiff with access to family court records, custody schedules, and home addresses. Derek Webb, security guard with keys to apartment buildings, and the trust that came with the uniform. Two brothers working together, hunting vulnerable children during custody transitions when parents were distracted and kids were shuttled between homes. Detective Morales felt sick. How many? She said aloud, though no one had asked the question. How many buildings does Derek Webb have access to? How many children? Dr. Chun focused on Emma, who had identified her abuser and was now collapsing into exhausted tears. You did so good, Emma. So good. You're the bravest girl I've ever met. Rex stood and walked slowly to Emma, placing his large head on her lap. The little girl wrapped her arms around the dog's neck and cried into his fur. Rex didn't move, didn't pull away, just stood there providing the comfort that only an animal can give, pure, unconditional, and without judgment. Officer Morrison, who had been standing quietly by the door, felt tears prickling his own eyes. Rex had done exactly what he'd been trained to do. The dog had detected Emma's trauma, identified the threat, and now offered comfort. The program worked. But the cost, the terrible cost of what this child had endured, made him question whether any program could truly protect children from the monsters who hid in plain sight. Judge Rivera entered the chambers, her face grave. Detective Morales, I've issued a warrant for Derek Webb's immediate arrest. Every unit in the city is looking for him. But even as she spoke, everyone in that room knew the truth. The hard part wasn't catching Derek Webb. The hard part would be learning how long he'd been preying on children, how many victims there were, and whether Marcus Webb had been helping his brother target vulnerable kids from family court cases. Emma had found her voice. Now it was time for justice to find Derek Webb. Detective Lisa Morales stood outside Derek Webb's apartment at 847 Riverside Drive, her hand resting on her service weapon. Behind her, a SWAT team was positioned and ready. The building was a modest 3-story complex in southeast Portland, a kind of place where working families struggled to make rent and nobody asked too many questions. It was 2:47 p.m. less than 4 hours since Emma Rodriguez had screamed, "Bad man," in that courtroom. "Breach on my count," the SWAT commander said quietly into his radio. 3, 2, 1, go. The door exploded inward with a deafening crack. Officers poured into the apartment, weapons raised, shouting commands. "Police! Search warrant!" "Get down! Get down!" But the apartment was empty. Derek Webb wasn't home. What they found inside, however, would haunt every officer present for the rest of their lives. The living room walls were covered with photographs. Hundreds of them. Children's faces stared out from every surface kids at playgrounds, walking to school, sleeping through apartment windows. They were organized by building, by age, by some sick classification system that only made sense to a predator's twisted mind. Morales felt bile rise in her throat as she stepped deeper into the apartment. "Dear God," whispered Officer Sarah Kim, a 10-year veteran who thought she'd seen everything. "How long has he been doing this?" On Derek Webb's desk sat multiple laptops, all open, all running. The screens displayed security camera feeds from 4 different apartment buildings. Morales recognized the interface. It was Paramount Property Management's security system. Derek had legitimate access to watch every hallway, every entrance, every family coming and going. He'd turned his job into a hunting ground. "Get the tech team in here now," Morales ordered. "I want every hard drive, every phone, every piece of electronics seized and analyzed." She pulled on latex gloves and began carefully examining the desk. A notebook lay open, filled with handwritten entries. Names, addresses, schedules. Rodriguez. Emma, 3 years old, wed. Fry, son, night's father, heavy sleeper, takes medication. Morales's hands shook as she turned the pages. There were more entries. So many more. Shun, Lily, 5 years old. Martinez. Sophia, 4 years old. Johnson, Michael, 6 years old. Each entry contained detailed notes about the child's routine, the parents' schedules, when the apartment would be most vulnerable. This wasn't opportunistic abuse. This was calculated, systematic predation. "Detective, you need to see this." Officer Kim stood in front of a closet, her face pale. Inside hung 4 different security uniforms from different companies. Derek Webb hadn't just worked for Paramount. He'd held positions at multiple property management firms over the past 5 years, giving him access to dozens of buildings across the city. But it was what she found in the bedroom that made Morales immediately grab her radio. A corkboard on the wall displayed a map of Portland with colored pins marking different locations. Red pins for current targets. Yellow pins for completed cases. Blue pins for future prospects. And in the corner of the board, a photo of Marcus Webb in his bailiff uniform, next to a stack of documents, custody agreements, court schedules, home addresses, all stolen from family court records. "This is Morales. We have confirmation of a multi-year, multi-victim child predator operation. Derek Webb has been targeting children in at least 8 different apartment buildings. His brother Marcus provided intel from family court cases, custody schedules, addresses vulnerable families going through divorces." She paused, steadying her voice. "We're looking at potentially dozens of victims." The tech team arrived and began cataloging evidence. One analyst, a young woman named Jennifer Park, sat down at the main computer and began breaking through Derek's passwords. What she found in his files made her physically ill. Thousands of photos, videos, documents tracking each child's routine down to the minute. A spreadsheet listing children by risk level, those whose parents were too distracted by custody battles to notice changes in behavior, ranked as low risk. "He's been doing this for at least 5 years. Park reported, her voice hollow. "Maybe longer." "These files go back to 2018. Morales pulled out her phone and called the district attorney's office. "We need to activate the Child Advocacy Center's Mass Victim Protocol." Derek Webb's brother works at the courthouse. Marcus had access to every custody case that came through family court. They were targeting kids whose families were in crisis. At that moment, uniformed officers were already fanning out across Portland, knocking on doors at 8 different apartment complexes. Each building where Derek Webb had worked. Each family with young children. Each parent who was about to learn that the friendly security guard who had seemed so trustworthy might have been a monster. At Miguel Rodriguez's apartment building, officers found the security camera footage they needed. There he was, Derek Webb, using his master key to enter apartment 4C at 2:17 a.m. on a Wednesday night. The timestamp was from 3 weeks ago, right before Emma stopped speaking. He stayed for 18 minutes. The camera showed him leaving, adjusting his uniform, looking calm and professional. Then he did his usual rounds, as if nothing had happened. He'd done this before. Many times. Building manager Patricia Holmes sat in her office, sobbing as she watched the footage. "He was Employee of the Month," she said brokenly. "The residents loved him. Parents felt safe because he was always around, always watching. Oh God, he was always watching." Back at the courthouse, Marcus Webb sat in an interrogation room, his face bruised from his collision with the marble floor, his wrists cuffed to the table. He'd already lawyered up, refusing to speak. But his cell phone, seized during his arrest, told the story he wouldn't. Text messages to his brother. "Rodriguez kid. Wed night, dad takes sleeping pills. New family moving into Clearwater Apartments. Single mom, 2 girls under 6. Custody hearing tomorrow. Thompson case, dad gets weekends, address attached." Detective Morales entered the interrogation room and sat across from Marcus. She laid out printed screenshots of his text messages, one by one, watching his face. "You fed your brother children," she said coldly. "You used your position of trust in the court system to identify vulnerable kids and deliver them to a predator. You're not just an accomplice, Marcus. You're a co-conspirator in the systematic abuse of children." Marcus Webb said nothing, but sweat beaded on his forehead. His lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. "Here's what's going to happen," Morales continued. "Every case you worked in the past 5 years will be reviewed. Every custody hearing you attended. Every document you had access to. We're going to find every child your brother targeted, and we're going to connect you to each one." She leaned forward. "But if you help us find Derek right now, if you tell us where he runs when he's scared, maybe the prosecutor considers cooperation. Maybe you get a chance at eventual freedom instead of dying in prison." Marcus Webb's lawyer shook his head sharply, but Marcus raised his hand. He was 53 years old. Life in prison meant exactly that. "He has a cabin," Marcus said quietly, his voice breaking. "Our father's old hunting cabin. Near Mount Hood, Timberline area. That's where he goes." Morales was on her feet immediately, radioing the information to dispatch. State police and federal agents were mobilized within minutes. A helicopter was dispatched. Ground units rolled toward the mountain. Derek Webb had a 2-hour head start, but now they knew where he was running. As officers swarmed toward Mount Hood, the Child Advocacy Center began the heartbreaking work of identifying Derek Webb's victims. 8 apartment buildings. 5 years of employment. Hundreds of families. Dr. Sarah Chun and her team prepared for what would be weeks, maybe months, of interviews with traumatized children whose parents had trusted the wrong person. At the courthouse, Emma Rodriguez sat in Judge Rivera's chambers, eating animal crackers and watching cartoons on a tablet, with Rex's head resting on her feet. She had no idea that her 2 words, "bad man," had set off a cascade that would rescue other children from the same nightmare she'd endured. She didn't know that her courage in speaking up had broken open a predator ring that had operated in darkness for years. All Emma knew was that the nice dog made her feel safe. The nice lady with the gentle voice believed her. And her daddy, who sat nearby with tears streaming down his face, kept telling her he loved her and would never let anyone hurt her again. 3 hours later, as the sun began to set over Mount Hood, Oregon State Police found Derek Webb's truck at a remote trailhead. K-9 units tracked his scent to the old hunting cabin Marcus had described. When tactical officers breached the door, they found Derek Webb sitting at a table, a gun beside him, his head in his hands. He didn't resist. He didn't fight. He just looked up at the officers with empty eyes and said, "It's over, isn't it?" "Yes," the lead officer said, handcuffing him. It's over. But for the victims, for Emma, and the others whose childhoods had been stolen, it was really just beginning. The long road to healing stretched ahead. Miguel Rodriguez sat alone in his apartment at 3 a.m., unable to sleep, unable to think, unable to do anything but replay the nightmare in his mind. His daughter had been violated in the room next to his, while he slept peacefully, trusting that she was safe. The prescription sleep medication his doctor had given him for stress, the very pills that helped him cope with the divorce, had made him into an unwitting accomplice to his daughter's abuse. The apartment felt different now, contaminated. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Every sound made him jump. The police had finished processing the scene hours ago, collecting evidence, taking photographs, dusting for fingerprints. Yellow crime scene tape still blocked Emma's bedroom door. Miguel couldn't bring himself to go inside. He couldn't bear to see the room where Derek Webb had hurt his baby girl. His phone rang, shattering the silence. Detective Morales. Miguel's hand shook as he answered. "Did you find him? Please tell me you found him." "We have Derek Webb in custody," Morales said, her voice tired but satisfied. "He's being transported back to Portland. He'll be arraigned tomorrow morning. But Miguel, I need to talk to you about something else. Can I come over?" 20 minutes later, Morales sat across from Miguel in his living room, a laptop open between them. "The security footage from your building doesn't just show Derek entering your apartment. It shows him entering 3 other apartments in this building alone. Families with young children. All during custody exchange periods when the parents were exhausted and distracted." Miguel felt sick. "Other kids? Here?" Morales nodded grimly. "We've identified potential victims in 8 different buildings across Portland. But we need families to come forward. We need parents to talk to their children, to watch for signs, to let us interview kids who might have been too scared to tell anyone." She paused. "Miguel," Emma broke the silence. "Her courage is going to save other children. But we need more parents, like you parents, willing to face this horror and help their kids heal. What do I do?" Miguel asked, his voice breaking. "How do I help her? How do I make this right?" "You already started," Morales said gently. "You believed her. You didn't question or doubt. You let the professionals do their job. Now you keep doing that. Therapy, patience, love. And you let Kama know that what happened wasn't her fault, and it wasn't your fault. Derek Webb is a professional predator. He knew exactly how to exploit vulnerability." Over the next 3 days, Detective Morales and her team conducted one of the most intensive investigations in Portland's history. They reviewed 5 years of Derek Webb's employment records, cross-referenced them with family court cases Marcus had accessed, and identified 43 families who fit the predator's target profile. Child advocacy specialists began reaching out to these families, offering support and resources. The response was heartbreaking. Within the first 48 hours, 7 more families came forward. 7 more children, ages 3 to 8, who had been carrying the same terrible secret as Emma. Their parents hadn't connected the dots. Behavioral changes. Nightmares, fear of the dark, sudden anxiety around men in uniforms. They'd attributed it to the stress of divorce, to custody transitions, to the normal challenges of childhood. They'd never suspected the friendly security guard who always waved and asked how their kids were doing. 4-year-old Lily Chun had stopped eating and started having panic attacks, but her mother thought it was separation anxiety from the custody battle. 6-year-old Marcus Thompson had begun wetting the bed again, but his father assumed it was regression from the divorce stress. 5-year-old Sofia Martinez had drawn pictures at school of the Nightman that her teacher had flagged as concerning, but her mother had been too overwhelmed with legal battles to fully investigate. Now these families sat in the Child Advocacy Center. their children in age-appropriate interview rooms with specialists like Dr. Sarah Chun, finally learning the truth they'd missed while fighting their own battles in family court. The guilt was overwhelming. The anger was explosive. But the priority was the children, helping them understand they were believed, they were safe, and they were not alone. Dr. Chun worked with Emma Rodriguez 3 times a week, using play therapy, art therapy, and Rex's comforting presence to help the little girl process her trauma. Emma was slowly coming back to life. She spoke more each session, smiled occasionally, even laughed when Rex did something silly. But the nightmares persisted, and she refused to sleep alone. It was during the 4th therapy session that Emma said something that changed everything. She was coloring a picture of a rainbow with Rex lying beside her when she suddenly looked up at Dr. Chun. "Dr. Sarah? Can other kids see Rex too? The ones who are scared like me?" Dr. Chun felt her heart squeeze. "Why do you ask, sweetie?" "Because Rex makes me feel better. And if there are other kids who are scared of bad men, maybe Rex can help them too." Emma looked at the German Shepherd with absolute trust. "He's a hero dog." That simple statement from a 4-year-old sparked an idea that would revolutionize trauma care. Dr. Chun immediately contacted Officer Morrison and presented a proposal. Expand the K9 trauma detection program to include victim support services. Train dogs not just to detect trauma, but to provide comfort during interviews, therapy sessions, and court testimony. Morrison loved the idea. Within weeks, he was meeting with department leadership, presenting data from Emma's case, how Rex's detection had saved her, how his presence had helped her open up in therapy, how the bond between traumatized child and trained dog could facilitate healing. The proposal was approved with full funding. Rex became the model for a new generation of trauma support, K9 South. But the most powerful breakthrough came during Derek Webb's trial. The prosecutor's office had built an overwhelming case: photographs, videos, text messages between the brothers, testimony from building managers, and security footage showing Derek entering apartments during the times of reported abuse. Derek's defense attorney knew conviction was inevitable and pushed for a plea deal. Derek Webb agreed to plead guilty to all charges in exchange for life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, sparing the children from having to testify. Marcus Webb, facing his own trial as a co-conspirator, also accepted a plea deal: 25 years with no early release. The judge, in accepting the pleas, made a statement that echoed through the courtroom and later on news broadcasts across the country. These men violated the most sacred trust society places in its institutions, the protection of children. One wore a badge and used the justice system to target vulnerable families. The other wore a security uniform and weaponized the trust parents placed in him. Together, they created a network of abuse that devastated innocent lives. But they were caught because of the courage of one little girl who found her voice, and because of a remarkable dog trained to detect what humans miss. This case should serve as a reminder that protecting children requires vigilance at every level of society. The day the plea deals were announced, Miguel Rodriguez brought Emma to the courthouse. Not to see the men who had hurt her, they would remain in holding cells, away from victim families, but to see Judge Rivera, Dr. Chun, Detective Morales, Officer Morrison, and Rex. Emma wore a pink dress and carried her stuffed rabbit. She was smiling. "I wanted Emma to see this place differently," Miguel explained to the gathered group. "Not as a place where she was scared, but as a place where people believed her and helped her." He knelt beside his daughter. "Emma, can you tell everyone what you told me this morning?" Emma looked up at the adults who had saved her. "I'm not scared anymore," she said clearly, "because the bad men can't hurt anyone now. And Rex will protect other kids." She walked over to the German Shepherd and hugged him. "Right, Rex?" Rex's tail wagged enthusiastically, and every adult in that room had tears in their eyes. Emma Rodriguez had not only found her voice, she had used it to tear down a predator network, protect other children, and inspire a program that would go on to help thousands of young victims across the country. Her 2 words in a courtroom had become a battle cry for justice. And it all started because she was brave enough to point and say, "Bad man." 6 months after Emma Rodriguez first spoke those 2 words in a Portland courtroom, the ripple effects of her courage had transformed not just her own life, but the entire landscape of child protection in America. The story that began with a terrified 3-year-old and a trained German shepherd had become a national movement that would change how law enforcement, courts, and communities protected their most vulnerable members. The sentencing hearing for Derek and Marcus Webb drew national media attention. Reporters from every major news network lined up outside the Multnomah County Courthouse, their cameras trained on the entrance where families of victims would soon arrive. Inside courtroom 4B, the same room where Emma had broken her silence, Judge Margaret Rivera prepared to hand down sentences that would send a clear message. Those who prey on children would face the full weight of justice. Derek Webb entered first, shackled and wearing an orange jumpsuit, his face hollow and aged beyond his 41 years. 6 months in custody had stripped away the friendly security guard persona he'd maintained for so long. Now he looked like exactly what he was, a predator who had been caught. His attorney sat beside him, knowing there was nothing left to argue. The plea deal was final. Life without parole on 47 counts of child abuse, plus additional charges of burglary, unlawful entry, and exploitation of a minor. Marcus Webb followed, looking equally defeated. The former bailiff, who had once commanded respect in this very courtroom, now faced 25 years for conspiracy, providing material support to child abuse and abuse of his position. His career, his reputation, his freedom, all destroyed by his choice to help his brother hunt innocent children. Judge Rivera surveyed the packed courtroom. In the gallery sat families, mothers and fathers, who had entrusted their children's safety to institutions that had failed them. She saw Miguel Rodriguez holding Emma, who was now 4 years old and thriving in therapy. She saw the Shun family, the Martinez family, the Thompson family, all the families whose children had been victimized by the Webb brothers' systematic operation. "Before I impose sentence," Judge Rivera began, her voice carrying the weight of 3 decades on the bench, "I want to address what brought us to this moment. Derek Webb, you violated children who were already vulnerable, children whose families were in crisis, whose parents were distracted by custody battles and divorce proceedings. You weaponized your position of trust, using security access to hunt victims as methodically as a predator stalks prey." Derek Webb stared at the table, refusing to make eye contact. "Marcus Webb," the judge continued, turning to the former bailiff, "your betrayal cuts even deeper. You worked in family court. You saw families at their most vulnerable moments. And instead of protecting them, you fed information to your brother addresses, schedules, custody arrangements. You turned this courthouse into a hunting ground. You betrayed every principle of justice this institution represents." Marcus's shoulders shook, but whether from remorse or self-pity, no one could tell. Judge Rivera opened the sentencing documents. "Derek Webb, you are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, to be served consecutively on all 47 counts. Marcus Webb, you are sentenced to 25 years in federal prison with no eligibility for early release. You will both be registered as sex offenders for life. You will have no contact with minors, including through written correspondence. Take them away." As bailiffs led the brothers out of the courtroom, Emma watched from her father's lap. She didn't understand all the legal language, but she understood that the bad men were going away forever. She leaned into Miguel's chest and whispered, "Is it really over, Daddy?" "Yes, baby," Miguel said, tears streaming down his face. "It's really over. You're safe now." But the story was far from over. It was transforming into something larger and more hopeful than anyone had imagined. In the 6 months since Emma's disclosure, the K9 Trauma Detection Program had exploded from a small pilot project into a national initiative. Officer Jake Morrison and Rex had become ambassadors for the program, traveling to police departments in 37 states to train new K9 teams in trauma detection and victim support. The science behind the program fascinated researchers and law enforcement alike. Dogs could detect microscopic changes in stress hormones cortisol, adrenaline, and neuropeptides that humans couldn't perceive. When a child experienced severe trauma, these chemical markers lingered in their scent profile for weeks. Trained dogs could identify these markers with remarkable accuracy, providing an early warning system that could save children before abuse escalated. Federal funding poured in. The Department of Justice allocated $12 million to expand the program nationwide. 20 new K9 teams were trained in the first wave, with plans for 50 more by year's end. Each dog underwent 18 months of specialized training, learning to differentiate between normal childhood stress and the specific chemical signatures of abuse and trauma. Rex became a celebrity featured in Time magazine, invited to the White House, honored by child advocacy organizations across the country. But his most important work happened away from cameras, in quiet therapy rooms where traumatized children found comfort in his calm presence. Emma's question, "Can other kids see Rex too?" had inspired a support program that paired trauma detection dogs with child victims during interviews, therapy sessions, and court proceedings. Dr. Sarah Chan's research on the program yielded stunning results. Children who had K9 support during forensic interviews disclosed abuse at rates 37% higher than children without animal assistance. The dogs provided non-judgmental comfort that helped kids feel safe enough to speak. Trauma recovery times decreased by an average of 4 months when therapy included K9 support. The data was irrefutable. Emma had been right. Rex and dogs like him were heroes who could help scared children heal. The program's success inspired related innovations. Portland implemented new courthouse security protocols, requiring background checks every 6 months instead of annually. Family court systems nationwide adopted policies requiring mandatory training on recognizing signs of child abuse. Property management companies overhauled their hiring practices, implementing more rigorous screening for employees with access to residential buildings. But perhaps the most significant change happened in communities themselves. Emma's story sparked a national conversation about protecting children during family transitions. Divorce and custody cases were already traumatic for kids. The Webb case revealed how predators specifically targeted these vulnerable populations. Parents began talking more openly with their children about body safety, appropriate touch, and the importance of speaking up, even when scared. Schools incorporated new curricula, teaching children that secrets about touching were never okay, that trusted adults sometimes did bad things, and that kids should always tell if someone made them uncomfortable. The message was clear and consistent. If something feels wrong, speak up. Your voice matters. You will be believed. Emma Rodriguez became the face of this movement, though her family carefully protected her privacy. Her image was never published, her last name often omitted from media reports. But her story, the story of a little girl who found her voice and saved countless others, inspired children across the country to speak their own truths. Letters poured into the Portland Police Department addressed to Emma and Rex. Children wrote about their own fears, their own experiences, their own courage in speaking up after hearing Emma's story. Each letter was carefully preserved, and when age appropriate, shared with Emma. She kept them in a special box decorated with rainbow stickers and dog paw prints. These are from other brave kids, Miguel told her as they read through a batch of letters together. Kids who heard your story and decided to be brave too. Emma looked up at her father with eyes that, while still carrying shadows of trauma, now also sparkled with pride and healing. Rex helped them too? Rex and dogs like him are helping kids all over the country now. Because of you, Emma. Because you were brave enough to speak up. Officer Morrison retired Rex from active patrol duty, transitioning the 9-year-old German Shepherd into full-time therapy and education work. Together, they visited schools, child advocacy centers, and family courts, teaching children and adults alike about the power of speaking up and the importance of listening when children find their voices. At one school assembly, Morrison told Emma's story, carefully edited for young ears, and a first grader raised his hand. "Is Emma a superhero?" the boy asked. Morrison smiled. "Emma is a real hero. She didn't have superpowers or a cape. She just had courage. And sometimes, courage is the most powerful superpower of all." As the sentencing hearing concluded and families filed out of the courthouse, Detective Lisa Morales stood in the hallway reviewing case files. The investigation had closed, the predators were imprisoned, justice had been served. But her work continued. There were always more children who needed protection, more families who needed support, more predators who needed to be stopped. Emma walked past with Miguel, and Morales knelt down to the little girl's level. "Emma, I want you to know something. You're the bravest person I've ever met. You changed the world." Emma smiled shyly. "I just talked. Rex did the hero stuff. You both did," Morales said. "You were a team. And because of that team, a lot of kids are safer now." As Emma and Miguel left the courthouse hand in hand, the sun breaking through Portland's typical clouds, they passed a new plaque being installed near the entrance. It read, "In recognition of the courage of child victims who find their voice, and the dedicated professionals and canine partners who help them heal. Speak up, be heard, be believed." Emma pointed at the plaque. "That's for kids like me, right, Daddy? That's for kids exactly like you, baby. Kids who are brave enough to say when something's wrong." The transformation was complete. What had begun with 2 words, "Bad Man," had evolved into a national movement that would protect children for generations to come. Emma Rodriguez had not only survived her trauma, she had transformed it into hope, healing, and systemic change that would echo far beyond that March morning in a Portland courtroom. Justice had been served. But more importantly, transformation had begun. 1 year after Emma Rodriguez spoke 2 words that changed everything, spring sunshine flooded through the windows of a community center in southeast Portland. Colorful balloons bobbed against the ceiling, a banner reading "Happy 5th Birthday, Emma," stretched across one wall, and the sound of children's laughter filled the air. This wasn't just a birthday party. It was a celebration of survival, healing, and the extraordinary courage of one little girl who had become a beacon of hope for countless others. Emma twirled in her new purple dress, her dark hair bouncing in pigtails tied with sparkly ribbons. The haunted look that had once filled her eyes was gone, replaced by the bright, curious gaze of a healthy 5-year-old. She raced between groups of children, playing tag and giggling sounds that Miguel Rodriguez never thought he'd hear again during those dark weeks when his daughter had been locked in silence. "She's a completely different child," Dr. Sarah Chun told Miguel as they watched Emma play. The trauma specialist had worked with Emma weekly for the past year, using play therapy, art therapy, and Rex's calming presence to help the little girl process and heal from her abuse. The nightmares have stopped. She sleeps through the night. She's made friends at her new preschool. Miguel, she's thriving. Miguel wiped tears from his eyes. "There were days I thought we'd never get here. Days when I blamed myself so much I could barely function. But you did function, Dr. Chun said gently. You got help for her and for yourself. You attended every therapy session, every parent support group. You learned how to talk to her about what happened in age-appropriate ways. You created a safe, loving environment where she could heal. That's what good parents do, Miguel. They show up even when it's hard. Sofia Rodriguez, Emma's mother, approached with a tray of cupcakes. The past year had transformed her relationship with Miguel from bitter enemies to collaborative, co-parents united by their daughter's well-being. They'd both attended therapy individual and family sessions, learning to communicate, to support Emma, and to let go of the anger that had once consumed them. She wants to cut the cake now, Sofia said with a smile. And she specifically requested that Rex be present for the ceremony. As if on cue, Officer Jake Morrison arrived with Rex at his side. The German shepherd wore a festive bandana tied around his neck, and his tail wagged enthusiastically when he spotted Emma. The little girl squealed with delight and ran to hug the dog who had saved her life. Rex, you came. Emma threw her arms around the dog's neck, and Rex responded by gently licking her cheek. The bond between them was unbreakable, formed in trauma, strengthened in healing, and now celebrated in joy. Morrison smiled as he watched them together. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Rex has been excited all morning. I think he knows this is a special day. The party continued with cake, presents, and games. But the most meaningful moment came when Judge Margaret Rivera arrived, carrying a special gift. The judge had followed Emma's recovery closely, checking in regularly with Dr. Chun and the family. She'd presided over the final custody agreement that had given both parents joint custody with a focus on Emma's therapeutic needs, a model that family courts across the country were now adopting. Emma, Judge Rivera said, kneeling to the child's level. I have something special for you. She presented a framed certificate with Emma's name beautifully lettered across the top. This is a Courage Award from the Portland Police Department and the Child Advocacy Center. It's to honor your bravery and to thank you for helping so many other children. Emma studied the certificate carefully, her small fingers tracing the gold seal. Other kids aren't scared anymore? Because of you, many other children found the courage to speak up about people who hurt them, Judge Rivera explained. And Rex and his dog friends are helping kids all over the country now. You started something very important, Emma. You showed everyone that even the smallest voices can create the biggest changes. Emma's face lit up with understanding and pride. Can I show this to the other brave kids? The ones who write me letters? You can share it with anyone you want, Judge Rivera said, her own eyes misting. You've earned it. The party wound down as afternoon turned to evening. Families began leaving, thanking Miguel and Sofia for hosting, telling Emma happy birthday, and marveling at how far she'd come. Detective Lisa Morales, who had also attended, pulled Miguel aside for a quiet conversation. I wanted you to know the investigation is completely closed now. We identified 32 victims total across the 8 buildings where Derek Webb worked. Thanks to Emma's courage in coming forward first, every single one of those families received support, counseling, and justice. Some of those kids might never have spoken up if Emma hadn't broken the silence first. Miguel's voice was thick with emotion. 32 children. My daughter's nightmare saved 32 other kids from continuing to suffer in silence. More than that, Morales said. The K-9 Trauma Detection Program has now identified 47 additional abuse cases across the country situations that would have gone undetected without dogs like Rex. Emma's 2 words literally started a revolution in how we protect children. As the sun set over Portland, casting golden light through the community center windows, the remaining guests gathered for a final surprise. Officer Morrison had coordinated with the Portland Police K-9 unit to bring 5 other trauma detection dogs to meet Emma dogs who had been trained in the expanded program that her case had inspired. Emma's face glowed with wonder as she met each dog. Luna, a golden retriever working in Seattle. Max, a Labrador serving in San Francisco. Bella, a Belgian Malinois stationed in Denver. Duke, another German Shepherd in Phoenix. And Rosie, a mixed breed rescue working in Chicago. Each handler shared a brief story of how their dog had helped a child, how the program had made a difference, how Emma's courage had paved the way. These dogs are all heroes, just like Rex, Morrison told Emma, and they're all here because of you. Because you were brave enough to say, "Bad man," when you were scared. You showed the world that kids' voices matter. Emma looked around at all the dogs, and at the adults who had believed her, protected her, and helped her heal. Her small voice carried clearly through the quiet room. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was just really scared. But Rex made me feel safe. And Dr. Sarah listened. And Daddy and Mommy believed me. I think they're the heroes. Dr. Chun wiped away tears. No, sweetheart. You're all heroes. That's the beautiful truth. Healing takes a whole team of people who care. As the party finally ended, Miguel and Sophia tucked a very tired Emma into Miguel's car for the drive home. She clutched her Courage Award in one hand and a stuffed dog that looked like Rex in the other, a gift from Officer Morrison. Before she fell asleep, she murmured something that made both her parents' hearts squeeze with love and pride. Daddy? Mommy? I'm not scared of the dark anymore. Because I know if bad things happen, people will listen. And Rex and his friends are watching. That's right, baby, Sophia whispered. You're safe. You're loved. And you're so incredibly brave. 3 years later, Emma Rodriguez started 3rd grade at a new school. She was a happy, well-adjusted 8-year-old who loved reading, playing soccer, and visiting Rex at the Portland Police K-9 Training Center. She'd become an advocate, in her own way speaking at age-appropriate events about the importance of telling trusted adults when something feels wrong. The K-9 Trauma Detection program was now standard protocol in 43 states. Over 200 dogs had been trained, and thousands of children had been identified, protected, and helped because of the program Emma's case had launched. The Emma Protocol, as it became known in child welfare circles, emphasized early detection, trauma-informed interviews, and the integration of support animals in healing processes. Judge Rivera had retired but remained active in child advocacy work. She often spoke at conferences about the Rodriguez case, how a 3-year-old's 2 words had exposed institutional vulnerabilities and sparked nationwide reform. She always ended her presentations the same way. Listen to children. Believe children. Protect children. Their voices, no matter how small, can change the world. Officer Morrison and Rex, now retired, volunteered full-time at schools and advocacy centers. Rex had become the face of a movement, but he remained the same gentle, intuitive dog. He'd always been a guardian who could sense pain and offered comfort without judgment. Derek Webb died in prison 3 years into his sentence of prison justice. That many felt was appropriate for a child predator. Marcus Webb continued serving his 25 years. A broken man who would never again hold a position of public trust. But the true legacy of that March morning in courtroom 4B wasn't about the predators who were caught or the brothers who were punished. It was about Emma Rodriguez, a little girl who found her courage when she needed it most, pointed at danger, and spoke 2 simple words that echoed across a nation. Bad man. 2 words that saved 32 children from ongoing abuse. 2 words that inspired a program now protecting thousands more. 2 words that reminded the world that the smallest voices can create the loudest echoes. Emma grew up knowing her story. Her parents never hid it from her, but they also never let it define her. She was more than a survivor. She was a thriving, joyful child who happened to have experienced something terrible and had the courage to speak up about it. On the 10th anniversary of that day in court, now a teenager, Emma visited the courthouse where it all began. The memorial plaque still hung near the entrance. She read the words she'd heard so many times. Speak up. Be heard. Be believed. Emma placed her hand on the plaque and smiled. She was living proof that those words were true. She had spoken up. She had been heard. She had been believed. And in being believed, she had changed the world. Officer Morrison, now in his 70s, stood beside her with Rex's successor, a young German shepherd named Hero. Emma, there's something I've always wanted to tell you. That day in the courtroom, when you spoke up, that was the bravest thing I've ever witnessed in my entire career. You saved yourself. And in doing so, you saved so many others. Emma looked at the officer who had helped rescue her. Thank you for listening to Rex. Thank you for believing a scared little girl. Thank you for being part of my team. Always, Morrison said. You taught all of us that courage doesn't have an age limit. That truth is powerful. And that sometimes 2 words are all it takes to change everything. As Emma walked out of that courthouse, the same building where she'd once screamed in terror, she carried her head high. She was no longer a victim. She was a survivor, an advocate, and a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is always light. The legacy of Emma Rodriguez wasn't just in the programs that bore her name, or the countless children who had been saved because of her courage. Her legacy lived in every child who found the strength to speak up, every adult who chose to listen, and every community that decided protecting children was worth any effort. 2 words. 1 little girl. A lifetime of impact. That was Emma's legacy. And it would endure long after her story became legend, a testament to the power of courage, the importance of listening, and the truth that the smallest voices can create the most profound change. The end.